All right. Well, we spent the last several sessions focusing on diagramming, so I'm sure you have used up many tissue boxes. We will today have to do a little bit one more time with the tissue because we're going to talk about textual observations. And then after that, it will not be as painful on the future sessions together. But basically, we're just going through each of the steps in the process that we learned in our module in person together back in November, and looking at each assignment, making sure that things are clear there, and then also too providing you guys opportunity if you have specific questions either in the topic we're discussing or something related to your passage. Several of you have messaged me with questions connected to your passage or the assignments, and just want to encourage you to continue to feel free to do that. I know some of you here, or maybe some who are watching the video later because they couldn't make the class. Many guys are doing really well with the assignments, staying caught up. I'm trying to catch up on grading, so I've got one more assignment to be grading for you guys, and then I should be caught up. But just want to encourage anybody that's a little bit behind. It's okay. There's still plenty of time. Don't feel bad. I know some folks have gotten behind. They've had busy schedules or think other commitments. So I completely understand that. And just want to, some guys are tempted at this point in time to, reconsider, maybe drop the class, or because they go, I'm behind, I can't catch up. But I just want to encourage you, it's a long road, and there have been many men before you that have gone down this road, and some of whom have gotten behind, but were able to catch up. So it's still very early. I don't want anyone to be discouraged or feel bad, or feel if they're behind that they disappointed me in any way. We want to just help you guys. So if you're talking to any other brothers who mention they're behind or they're thinking of maybe dropping, just encourage them to stick with it. There will be many times in this course where you may feel like you just have too much to do, or it's difficult, but I just want to encourage everybody to keep moving forward, and always communicate with me. Let me know if something's a challenge or if you've gotten behind, or I want to help you in any way I can. So I know that if you've talked to guys who've gone through the class, I think most of them will tell you there were times of struggle for them too, but they're glad they stayed with it. And so again, most of you guys are doing great with your assignments, but just want to ask you to encourage your fellow students, fellow brothers in the class to not give up and keep moving forward. And I know some of the assignments would be difficult. Some you may, I'm trying to, when I grade your assignments, give you feedback, and some of you may, feel bad if you didn't do well. And I just want, this is as I said in class, just an opportunity to learn and to be helped in not only your preaching, but really, as you can see, our focus in the class is a lot on focus on the study portion as well, because I think many of you guys, I'm sure, are gifted communicators and feel called to the ministry. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So I think what I have seen over the years, just in doing the training, is it's the preparation and really understanding the passage that presents the biggest challenge for most of us. And so that's why we put a little more emphasis on the study steps, because, knowing what the original author said is critical. As we've said, before you can say what the author means to your hearers, what the text means to your audience, we first need to understand what the original author meant when he wrote it. And so that I think is a very difficult step, because we have to basically, deal with the translation of a text written in another language originally, in a different time, in a different place, in a different culture. And those present many challenges in trying to climb into the world of the author to understand what he's saying. So, all that said, that's why we spent a lot of time on various steps, especially diagramming, because diagramming is really essential to breaking down and understanding what the original author said, because he used language to say it. And so we have to deal with languages. So anyway, just to encourage you, press on, don't give up, and encourage our brothers in the same way. Okay, so for today, our attention is going to be drawn to assignment 1.16 in particular. And this assignment is known as the Textual Observations for your assigned passages from Colossians. And by the way, for this assignment and the next assignment, 116 and 117, you will do it for both your assigned passages. Notice passages here, plural. So you're going to do this for both of the passages, because the assigned passages are basically in the same paragraph in the text. We gave you 2 consecutive sets of verses that go together. All right. And so for the textual observations and then the word studies, you're going to be doing that for both your assigned passages. But then when we get to, and I've noted here, which the assignments and the sessions, the Zoom sessions related to those reviews. So if anybody has missed a previous session, you can catch up or look at it by, let's say you're still working on, assignment 1.13. Many of you have done it, but some still haven't. You can go back to these 3 sessions, covers that assignment. So today, for assignment 116, this session 1.10, we'll be focusing on textual observations. Then when we do the study of significant words of the passage, that's assignment 1.17. Again, that'll be for both of your assigned passages from Colossians. All right. Then when we get to assignment 1.18, so the next one, the significant words, the word study is going to be 1.17, which we'll cover in the next session next week, Lord willing, go over that. Then the next 2 steps, steps 7 and 8, our focus and our attention will be on assignments 1.18 and 1.19. And the reason I put 2 of those is you're going to do these for each passage separately. So 1.18 will be your resources and exegetical idea for your first assigned passage. And then assignment 1.19 will be these 2 steps for your second assigned passage. Okay, so that's where we'll split it up. But for the next 2 assignments, steps 5 and step 6, those assignments are going to be for both of your assigned passages together. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So today I want to look at making textual observations of the passage. All right, and this follows the block diagram. There'll be some overlap with what you did for the block diagram, because at this point, what we want to do is actually focus attention on some specific aspects of the text. One thing that, one illustration I like to use when we're going through the process, and you're noticing, man, there's a lot of steps here. We did reading through the book, and then background context of the book, and then the author's flow of thought through the book, and then the block diagram. And now we're doing textual observations, which is some similarities to the diagram. And then we're going to do word studies and then resource. So we're going, all these steps. Well, Well, I want you to think of yourself as like a jewelry expert. I don't remember the name of those guys. There's a name for them. The guys that study and make jewelry. And I want you to think of yourself like a diamond inspector. Okay. And if you've ever watched a guy examine a diamond, he doesn't just hold it in his hand and look at it, right? He'll actually put it under a light. He'll rotate it from different directions. He'll look at it with he'll have a magnified eyepiece and he'll examine carefully and rotate the diamond because he's looking for imperfections or details. And he does it in a careful way by examining the diamond from different vantage points, different points of view. All right. If he's good at it, he'll rotate the diamond, he'll use different backgrounds. And that's really what we're doing with the text is we're examining the text from different vantage point, different angles, looking for different things. And so we look at the background of the passage. We look at the author's flow of thought. We look at the diagram. We do textual observations, word studies, because we're examining the diamond of the text from different angles, different vantage points, and a different focus. And what you'll find in doing this is that certain things will come out as you're going through these steps, something that you didn't see in a previous step. Maybe you start doing a word study and you go, as you're looking at the passage in a particular word, something sticks out to you or strikes you that you didn't notice before. Or when we do a diagram, you're looking at the passage from a certain point of view. You're looking at the grammar and how phrases and clauses fit together. But then when we do textual observations, you're going to take note of specific types of grammar and specific elements in the passage that make you look at it from a slightly different angle. All right. And so once you've done all the steps, it's kind of like this, the jewelerist or whatever he's called, after he's examined this diamond from many different points of view. And this is what helps him to best determine the quality of the diamond. And in the same way, doing all of these different steps, looking at the passage from different perspectives, looking for different things, that's going to help you really better understand the text. And I think provide for many opportunities to have things appear to you from the passage that you may not have noticed by just looking at it, doing one kind of study in the past. Like if you just did, textual observations of the passage, if you didn't do the other steps, doing the observations, the textual observations will be helpful. You'll learn some things, but it won't be as helpful than doing all of the other steps as well. Okay? Any comments or questions on that before we jump into the textual observations? So think of yourself as sort of the guy looking at this diamond and taking care to examine this diamond from different angles and different vantage points in order to fully appreciate and understand the quality of that diamond. It's kind of like I don't know if you're familiar with Sherlock Holmes, the famous fictitious detective written by Arthur Conan Doyle back in the 18th century or 19th century, I think 18th century. And one thing about Sherlock Holmes was his ability to observe. When other police officers and detectives would look at a crime scene and they would only see certain things, but when Sherlock Holmes would examine a crime scene, he would notice very specific details. He was able to make good observations of things that other people missed. And so these steps that we're teaching you guys is meant to help you see things that you might normally miss. or others might not see them, but we want you to do a careful examination of the passage. And you'll notice things, especially as you get more experience with these steps, you'll begin to notice more things from the passage than you may have otherwise. All right. Let's get to it then. Okay, so textual observations. Now in this step, again, it will be grammar focused, not only grammar, but many of these elements will be grammar, but we want to look for particular things now in the text. And since we've done the diagram, we should be pretty familiar with the passage at this point. And here we'll just kind of step back, and then now we want to examine and look for specific individual elements or components, including these details. Now, like I said, some of this will overlap with the block diagram step, but some of it will not. And the intent here is to look at the passage as a whole, picking out specific grammatical details that sometimes when you diagram, you may not capture all of it by going through that process. So that said, let's review a couple things and maybe cover an example or two as well. One of the most critical grammatical features for us to examine and consider are the verbs. All right. They carry the action of the text. They move it forward. Obviously, you know, everything in the passage is important, but the verbs really play a key role because they present, again, like I would say, the action of the passage. They present they move it forward in understanding what's being said. Now, when we talk about verbs, English verbs, since we're looking at English translations primarily, we'll talk about the Greek aspects as we move forward in the class. But for now, our focus is on the English translation. So we're looking at English verbs, and in English, verbs have three main characteristics. And again, we discussed this in the class, but we're going to look at it by way of review. We have tense, we have mood, and we have voice. Those are the three main characteristics of the English verb. So when you do textual observations, you're going to want to identify every verb, regular verb in the passage, and then following that, identify the tense, the mood, and the voice. All right. Now, by the way, in Greek, we also have these same characteristics, tense, mood, and voice. And so what we learn here can be applicable to looking at the original language as well. All right. So with English, the tense, we've got three main tenses in English. There are some other ones, but just keeping it simple here and focusing our attention on the three primary most common tenses that we're going to see, and that is past, present, and future. All right, so past tense, he preached the word. Present tense, he preaches the word, it's happening now. Future tense, he will preach the word. So some features we need to pay attention to when we're looking at English is past tense verbs. Most of them, regular verbs, normally end with ed. All right, that's normally the way that we can identify past tense verb. Now, I know this confused some, or when you're doing the connector words, because participles can also look like a past tense verb, where it has a verb plus an ed ending. All right, but those kinds of participles are not as common. The ing participles are much more common. So you need to be careful. If you see a verb ending with ed, it's most likely a past tense verb in English. And you can confirm that by noticing there's a subject. When we say, okay, preached, he preached the word. And preached has a subject, he. There's someone who's doing that. He preached the word. So in this case, it is a past tense. It happened from the author's point of view, it happened sometime in his past. Okay? Present tense. He preaches or he is preaching the word. All right? It's happening in the present. And notice here's an ing verb that's not a participle in this case because two reasons. One, we have a verb of being in front of it, and two, there's a subject, he. All right? So that's, remember, the test for participles is look to see if there's a subject, look to see if there's a verb of being in front of it. Okay? So this is two ways to express the present tense. Is preaching focuses on it's happening actually right now. He preaches the word. That can also have this idea of this is a characteristic of him, that he preaches the word. But when we put he is preaching the word, that's emphasizing it's happening now and it's ongoing. All right, but both of these are present tense. And in future tense in English, often we'll have the helper verb will or shall. He will preach the word, or he shall preach the word. That's a way in English to express future tense. Now in Greek, it's just going to be the form of the verb. It'll be the same root verb for preach. I think it's keruso, if I remember correctly. And then that verb will just have a different form, same root, but a different form to show what tense it is. But in English, we have it with the ending will be a little different. Now, there are those irregular verbs, they're called, where they don't have an ed ending, but they like she lends a book. That's a present tense, but in past tense it could be she lent a book to the student. All right, so there are some verbs in English that don't have an ed ending. You normally wouldn't say she lended a book. You can say it that way, but that's not common anymore. She lent a book, or trying to think of some other examples. Another one that throws people off. He read the Bible. He reads the Bible. Okay, he reads the Bible, that's present. He read the Bible, that's past. We don't say you won't see this. He readed the Bible. Okay, that's not a that's not, you wouldn't see it worded that way. You'd see he read the Bible. So there are some verbs that don't follow the ed rule for past tense, but most do. Most do. Okay, so for tense, you're looking for past, present, or future. And as I said, there are some other tenses in English, the perfect tense. There's the, some of those more involved. But I just want us to focus on the three basic tenses. Okay. Questions on that? Verb tense?
Pastor,
Yes.
how about the infinitive? How we consider the infinitive? Let's say to pray, to ask.
Okay.
Will put,
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
that is my question. If we will put the infinitive, how we consider the infinitive? That is to pray, to ask. What is it? It is in the past or in the present tense? I want to pray, yes. Like that.
Yeah, that's a good good question. How do we identify tense for the infinitive? Um, Again, infinitives are not a normal regular verb. They don't function as a regular verb. In this case, I want to pray. To pray is sort of completes the verbal idea. And in this case, we would call it present tense, present infinitive. Trying to think if there are any examples of other tenses for the infinitive. Um, None's coming to mind right now to give that some thought. And by the way, with infinitives and participles, where they are different from regular verbs is that they don't have a mood like a regular verb. Um, that's where there's a difference between them. We'll look at that in a minute. But yeah, most infinitives that I'm familiar with are usually present tense. And they function in a lot of different ways, as I think put a section in your notes that talk about that. And we'll spend more time on infinitives when we get to a later module. We'll go into more detail as you've gotten more practice. For now, I just want you to be able to identify the infinitives, which again, remember, is the usually in English, it's expressed with a preposition to followed by a verb.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor.
All right. Okay, so we have tense, which we just covered. The second characteristic is the mood. Verbs have a mood, okay? And there are 4 different moods that we covered in class. You might see in some grammar books 5, but I wanted to focus our attention just on these 4. The indicative, the imperative, the interrogative, and the subjunctive. All right? And just think of the indicative is something that indicates. It's a statement of fact from the perspective of the author. It's a declaration. He preaches the word. All right? Or he preached the word. He will preach the word. All of those are a different tense, but they're all in the indicative. They're all making a statement, a declaration, again, a statement of fact from the vantage point or perspective of the author. Right? That's indicative, indicates. Now, imperative is the idea of a command. So here I have preach the word. I'm not making a request. I'm not making a statement. I am giving a command. Do this. All right. So preach the word would be an example here. It's a command. Right. Indicative, again, making a statement. Imperative, a command. And by the way, imperatives, you won't see the subject if it's in the second person. So if I'm telling you, you preach the word, then that you won't show up normally. Normally in English, you just simply say, preach the word. All right, the command, the subject is embedded in the command in English. Okay. Now, interrogative, the idea of interrogate, asking questions. So an interrogative is the verbs in the form of a question. And normally in English, you'll see that expressed with 2 things. One, helper verbs. Did he or will he preach the word? And then the second is, of course, the punctuation mark, the question mark. sorry, not punctuation mark, the question mark, the punctuation of the, so here we have a question, it's an interrogative. And then finally, the subjunctive. And the subjunctive is a little bit different, but it expresses a form of uncertainty. So it's not a statement of fact from the perspective of the author, but it's a statement with some uncertainty, some doubt. And in English, we express that by a word might or may. Okay. Now, this is a little different than if I were to say he will preach the word. Okay, that's a future tense verb with will there, but it's making a statement of fact from, again, the perspective of the author. There isn't uncertainty. But if I were to say he might preach the word, he may preach the word, I'm telling you I have some doubt. It's not a certainty. We call that a subjunctive mood. And we see this quite often in Greek. All right. There's a fifth form in Greek language called the optative. That has extreme uncertainty or doubt. Now, why does this matter? Well, let me give you an example of where this could be significant. Let's look up, how about Acts? Acts, I think 17. And I'm going to ask Alan to read a couple of verses here. Where is it? Yeah, okay. Go ahead and read verses 26 and 27, if you would,
Okay, thank
Alan.
you.
Thank you.
And and he made from one man every nation of mankind to inhabit all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitations, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might group for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us.
Okay, thank you. Now notice here in verse 27. So here Paul is declaring, right, to the Athenians, right? He was going through Athens and saw all these statues and idols and comes across the one to an unknown God. And then they had asked him to, they take him up to Mars Hill, which I actually had the opportunity to visit. I went to Athens a few years ago, and we actually found Mars Hill. It's right near the Areopagus, where their big temples are. And there's this smaller, much smaller sort of big rock. And it's actually Mars Hill. And so I went out and stood up on the rock there where Paul was. And so he was giving an account to the great minds and leaders of the city. And so as he was doing this, of course, he calls out to them, he draws their attention to the one true God, right? So he describes God as the one who made heaven and earth, right? He made all things. He's Lord of all. And then he adds to that what Alan just read, that he is sovereign, right? He determines our appointed times, boundaries of our habitations, that they would seek God. And then notice this, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him. Now notice here, we see this might. So what does that tell us? This verb grope, which means sort of, crawl for, reach for, look for. It says they might grope for him. That sounds like what mood? We just talked about, right? The mood of uncertainty, the subjunctive mood. That's where there's some doubt, right? Well, notice here in English, they added another word, if perhaps they might grope for him. And they did that because this verb in Greek is actually in what's called the optative. It's the greatest uncertainty and doubt. In fact, it's highly, highly doubtful. So Paul used this verb to really indicate we don't seek for God. Because he's saying maybe, perhaps, might, possibly, once in a million years, maybe seek God. So he actually used a mood that it has the idea of much doubt, like it's basically impossible. It's likely not going to happen. Okay? And so if we understand the mood of the verb, we're seeing he's not saying here really that people might possibly seek God. He's really, after presenting it with like, this doesn't happen, which again would connect us to the idea of election, right? Of God seeking the sinner, because the sinner won't seek for God. In fact, Paul says this rather directly. If you look at Romans, right? 3, there's none who seeks God. Romans 3:11, right? All have turned aside. There's none who does good, not even one. So here Paul makes a statement in the indicative mood. He makes it a statement of fact. When he was speaking on Mars Hill, he presented it to the Athenians in such a way that like this, they might, maybe, perhaps. And so in English, that optative mood was expressed by adding that word perhaps and then adding the word might. So it's significant doubt. There's another example of this, I think, if I remember right, it's in Romans 8. It's not coming to my mind. Romans 8. I'll have to think about.
Verse 4, Pastor.
Is it verse 4? Well, here it looks like subjunctive, which I can check. Yeah, that's a subjunctive. So that one's in the subjunctive mood, noted by the let's see. Is it that one? No, that's not ringing a bell. I'll have to give that some thought. Let me look at one other. Check one other thing, and then we'll just move on if I can't find it. Was it Romans? Oh, maybe it was Romans 6. Maybe it was Romans 6. Six. No. Okay. I'll have to think about that. It's not coming to my mind right now. All right. Well, let's move forward. Okay. So in any case, we don't have to worry about this in English. There's only the 4 moods here, but I just wanted to give let you know about, I think the optative, there's only used 7 or 8 times in the whole New Testament. So it's very rare, but it does emphasize great uncertainty, great doubt, that it's very unlikely. Whereas the subjunctive is, it's a possibility, but there isn't certainty to it. All right. So these are the 4 moods that we want to be aware of as we're looking at the verbs. All right. And then finally, and as I mentioned before, the participles and the infinitives won't have these moods. You don't have an imperative infinitive. You don't have an imperative participle. It's only for regular verbs. And then voice. Sorry, any questions on the mood before we look at the voice? All right. Now, voice is, it doesn't mean, you know, like volume or speaking. It's just the voice is the nature of the subject and its relationship to the verb. All right. So it describes the kind of connection between the subject and the verb. So an active voice means that the subject is doing the action. So he preached the word. The subject is doing the action. Okay, he, the subject, preached. So that's called active voice. Now, the passive voice is that the action is being done to the subject. All right, in this case, whoops, I forgot this. The subject is the word. The word was preached. All right, notice the difference here, guys. The first one, he preached the word. The subject's doing the action. The action is preached. All right, and in this first sentence, he preached the word. That means this is active voice. The subject's doing the action. But in the second example, the word was preached. This time, the word is not doing the preaching. It's being preached. So the voice of the verb was preached is in the passive, meaning that the subject is passive in this. The action is being done to the subject, right? You can think of it like active and passive, like you know, active is somebody's doing something, right? You know, say that guy's active. You know, he's working, he's doing things. Passive is when somebody doesn't, they let things be done to them. Right? This is the complaint of many wives, right? My husband's passive. He doesn't do anything. All right? And so that's actually the idea with in grammar. A passive verb means that the subject's not doing anything. It's being done to the subject. All right? Whereas active is the subject is the one doing it. Okay? So you've got this idea of he preached, subject he preached, the verb action, and he's doing the action. It's active. But the word was preached. All right. In this case, the subject of the sentence is the word, and the action's happening to the subject. Now, in English, the way that is expressed is by this verb of being in front of it. Okay, that indicates passive. She will be the bride, or she will be, what's a better one? She will be encouraged. All right. Notice there's it's future voice, will. It's going to happen in the future. Sorry, not voice, future tense. It's indicative, right? It's making a statement of fact. And notice this be in front of it, meaning that someone else is going to do the encouraging. The subject is passive here. All right. The action is happening to the subject. Okay, so this is important, and I'll show you an example of why in a minute. We'll look at a passage quick to show why this matters. And then finally, now this is not the case in English, but in Greek, we do have a third voice called the middle voice. I just want to make you aware of it, where the subject does the action, but it's to or for himself. So the idea is the verb, if it's in the middle voice in Greek, means that the subject is doing the action, but he's doing that action for his own benefit or in some way for himself or herself or whatever the subject is. Now in English, sometimes this reflexive pronoun will be included in order to show this idea of the middle voice. Not always, but sometimes that's an indicator. We'll deal more again as we go in the future. We'll deal more with the middle voice as we talk more about Greek elements. I just want to make you aware of this. But in English, you're only going to have two, active and passive. Okay? Now, why does this matter? What's the significance of this? Is this just, more grammar that, we have to suffer and deal with? And I just like to torture you with English grammar. But actually, this is important. And let me give you an example from Ephesians 5:18. All right? I think we familiar with this passage. Okay? Do not get drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be filled with or by the Spirit. Okay. So we have this verb here, be filled. And we want to ask ourselves, okay, tense, mood, and voice. So let me ask Stephen, if you're there.
Yes, Pastor Tim.
Good morning.
Morning.
So this verb, be filled, what is the tense?
Future.
Okay, future, or actually we could say present. It's do this now.
Okay.
It's actually present tense. Harder to see a little bit with the way it's structured here. What is the mood? Is this a statement, a command,
Imperative.
a question, or statement with some doubt?
I was thinking imperative. No?
Okay. Yes, it is a command, actually. Right? Be filled. Do this.
Mm.
It is a command, at which the first command is do not get drunk. All right. So that's also a command here. Imperative. So it's an imperative, present imperative. And then what's the voice? Is it active or passive?
Passive because you be filled. So you is the subject, but you is not the one filling himself, but it's the spirit or outside of the subject.
Exactly. Great observation. You're correct. This is a command, so the you is implied. You is the subject, but we ask ourselves, okay, for the voice, who's doing the action? Is the subject doing the action? And notice here that helper, that verb of being there, you be filled. So that's telling us the verb, the action is to be filled, but it's coming not from the subject. It's happening to the subject. You guys see that? So here we have an example of a command which is actually passive. And you have to think, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of an odd thing. You think about it, right? Because normally, if a command, that means you need to go do something, right? If I were to tell you, preach the word, right? Like Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy 4. Well, that's a command for Timothy to do something, for him to preach. But here, notice Paul doesn't say you fill by the Spirit. He says you be filled by the Spirit. So we don't do it. The Spirit does it, right? It's passive. So here's a command. So if you're teaching this passage, you want to make note of this. It's present tense, which means do it now. Like it's ongoing in the present. Secondly, it's a command. So it's an imperative, it's a command. Thirdly, it's passive, meaning it's a command, but it's a command to have something done to us. You know, I don't order the Spirit around. I don't tell him to fill me. I don't do something to be filled. I don't fill myself with the Spirit. Right? That's why I think a better translation is be filled by the Spirit. Because the agent of the action is not the subject. It's not you. It's the Spirit doing the action. And so this verse, then we need to think about, well, what does this mean then? I don't do the filling. The filling is being done by the Spirit to me, but it's a command, so I have to do something. What it is, right? You think about, so how do we obey a command that's in the passive voice? How do we obey a command for something to be done to us? You ever thought about that with this passage? Right? There's this idea of there are something that we need to do in order to put ourselves in the position to be filled by the Spirit. Or conversely, there's something that we may or may not do that can prevent us to be filled by the Spirit. So it's this idea of we need to put ourselves in the position for the Spirit to fill us. Now, he's not talking here about a second baptism or anything like that. There are two. This we'll get into a theological comment here for a minute. There is the indwelling of the Spirit. That's permanent. That comes when you become a Christian. The Spirit, right, transforms us. The Spirit enters us. We're indwelt by the Spirit. All Christians are indwelt by the Holy Spirit, right? The Spirit of Christ is in us. But there is also this idea of an ongoing work of the Spirit in us. And that's described in the New Testament as being filled by the Spirit. That we all have if you're a Christian, the Holy Spirit is always in you. However, the activity of the Spirit in your life, there are times where we are yielded to the Spirit working through us. All right, so Paul here is commanding that side of it. He's saying, put yourself in a position to be filled. Or keep yourself from preventing the filling of the Spirit. He's not talking about indwelling, all right? He's speaking to believers here. Spirit's already indwelling, but it's this idea of the Spirit's activity in our life. And there's some things we need to do to put ourselves in the position to be filled. Stephen mentioned in the chat, make ourselves available to be filled. It is this idea of to be filled means to be under the Spirit's control, to be used by the Spirit as he wills. But that won't automatically happen. We have to put ourselves in a position for the Spirit to work through us, to fill us, to empower us, to enable us to do some special task. So in this text, the idea is you have to figure out, okay, what is it that we can do to obey this command to be filled? How do we put ourselves in the position to be filled, to be controlled, to be used by the Spirit of God? Okay, so this is why this is an example why looking at these specific details of the verb is important. Okay, because some people have a mentality, as I've heard it taught, that we, I've seen guys walking around, and they're blowing the Holy Spirit on people, and they're acting like they're the ones who controls the spirit activity, and that's actually not the case, right? But there is something as a Christian we need to do to put ourselves in the position for the Spirit to fill us, to enable us, to empower us to be used by Him. All right. So Paul that's what he's commanding. Now, how do we do that? Well, that's a longer conversation. But I believe in the context of Ephesians, that happens by being immersed in the Word, that the Word is dwelling in us richly, and also by being with God's people, serving among God's people, that the Spirit works in those two ways, through His Word and through His people. And so to be filled means to put ourselves in that position by being immersed in His Word and by being in fellowship with His people, and then also by pursuing a holy life, that is what puts us in the position to be empowered and used by the Spirit to do His work. All right. Any comments or questions on that?
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
how about that get drunk? Cannot it be passive also?
Oh, okay. Good question. Let's go to, when he says there in verse 18, right? Do not get drunk with wine. It's passive there as well. Do not be made drunk by wine. Okay. So there's a parallel here. Don't be under the control of alcohol, be under the control of the Spirit. So it's kind of like, when a person gets drunk, that the alcohol puts them in a position of, they're not in full control, right? It's almost like, that's why in English here in the States, we might use the expression under the influence of alcohol. And the idea behind that is, if someone has too much alcohol, that affects the mind in such a way that it's like the person becomes different. It's almost like they're under the control of this substance. And so Paul says, don't be controlled by alcohol or, a substance, but be under the control of the Spirit. So both verbs are passive in this case. Both are passive imperative, present tense commands. I think present tense in both. Let me look again at the text here. Yeah, they're both present tense imperatives. Okay, so this is an important detail, when you're studying the text. Let me give you another example. This one actually from Hebrew text, Psalm. I was just actually going through this verse with somebody today, Psalm 73. When my heart was embittered and I was pierced within. Okay, this Psalm 73, we have an example of Asaph, who was one of the, music leaders in the temple. And he was struggling with envy and jealousy as he was, looking around. He starts the psalm off with, "As for me, my feet almost stumbled, my steps almost slipped. I was envious of the boastful. I saw the peace of the wicked." And he goes through and essentially explains how he's looking around him and he's seeing, all of these evil people and the wicked prospering, and doing well, it seemed. And so Asaph's looking at his own life and he's like, I work hard for God. I do all these things to serve the Lord. And I'm struggling. But this guy over here, he doesn't even believe in God. And look, he's so wealthy and his kids are healthy. And, and so Asaph got to a point that he almost walked away from God because of this. And interesting, he says in verse 21, "When my heart was embittered." Notice "was embittered." You guys see that? What voice is this?
It's a passive voice.
It's passive. And actually in the original Hebrew, the kind of verb that this is actually it's a nifal stem. It's a reflexive, meaning he made his own heart bitter. That the heart is the subject, but the actor is Asaph. He made his own heart bitter. He pierced himself. You see, Asaph came to a very important discovery that he was the problem. His own heart was the problem, that he made himself bitter. As he looked around and saw, the wealthy prospering, the wicked prospering, and he wasn't, that he caused himself to be bitter and to pierce his own heart. And so just understanding that the nature of the verb helps us to see he wasn't a victim of his circumstances. He did it to himself. And so these are a couple of examples that just to show us the importance of focusing attention on the details of the verbs, the characteristics of these verbs, because they will give us insight into what's going on here. Okay? So, and again, in English, we're looking at the tense, the mood, and the voice. All right? Comments or questions? Does that make sense, hopefully? Okay, then we'll keep moving forward. Let's do an example together of this. Where are we? Here we are. From Philemon. All right, 4-7. So what I'd like to do is I'll just ask one of you guys will just go through each verse. We'll identify the verbs, and then just tell me what is the tense, the mood, and the voice for each of those verbs, okay? So let's start with Brother Xerxes. Here, there. Can you do that for verse 4? Can you identify the verbs and then the 3 characteristics? Are you there, Xerxes? All right. Maybe he's needed to take a break for a minute. How about you, Sonny? Are you there? You able to do that? All right. Maybe not. How about Nigel? Are you around?
Hi, Pastor Tim. Morning.
Hi, good morning.
All right. Verse 4, right?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so we have thank
All right.
and remember.
So we have thank, remember. Okay. So let's just, what's the tense, mood, and voice for thank?
Present, active, and indicative.
Yep. He's making a statement in the present, and it's active voice. The action, the subject, I, is doing the action. All right, good. Okay, how about for remember?
It's the same. Still
Yes.
present, active, and indicative.
All right, making a statement. It's not a command, not a question. There is no uncertainty presented. So it's indicative mood, active voice, and present tense. All right, good. Let me have you.
Thank you.
Those were kind of easy. So I'm going to ask you to do verse 5 also, Nigel.
All right. Okay. Here. Have. Have is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right. Here is the same, I believe. It's present, active, and indicative.
Yep.
Okay. And then
About
have
that.
is the same also.
Yeah, man, this was
Yeah.
too easy.
Right.
All right. Good. Well, you got off easy. We'll have Angelo, you want to try verse 6?
Yes, Pastor. I'll try this one. The verb is verse 6 is pray and I think that's the only. Oh wait, that's the only verb I see in that particular verse, and that is still present, active, and it's still indicative.
Okay. So, right, pray, yes, is present, active, and then indicative. Okay, good. All right, let's see. Do we have any other verbs here? And I think we do have a couple more.
Oh, wait. For sharing the faith to become effective.
Okay, yeah, what? I'll give you a hint there. Okay, we have
I
pray.
think,
I'll just highlight.
positive, I think the maybe become.
Maybe
Yeah.
become.
Yes, may become effective. All right, and then another one is actually.
Oh,
Yeah, that one we usually miss that one. It's a little verb, and it's a verb of being. It's not a verb of action. So sometimes we don't see that right away. So how about may become? What tense does that?
may become. May become is present, and it's this
Notice?
time I think it's passive. Oh wait, may become effective.
Yeah.
Faith may become.
Well, let's do the mood. Okay, we can do the voice. So here we just ask if it's active or passive. You just ask who's doing the action. So is faith doing the action? Faith may become effective.
It is not doing the action.
You don't sound confident.
It's not doing the action.
Okay.
It's final answer.
Final answer. All right.
Yes.
Actually, in this case, it is doing the action. All right. How could I explain that? So it's the faith becoming effective. It's not, the effective isn't being done to the faith, it's the faith actually becoming that. So this is actually active in this case. And then what's the mood?
The mood is
Notice that helping verb may. Remember what I said about that. If you see may or might, then
that is considered to be the fourth one, the subjunctive.
yeah, subjunctive. Now, there's something that Jim mentioned in class that it's important to remember here. That the tense for subjunctive verbs, the tense is a little bit more of a challenge. This is a present tense, or this looks like present tense, but it's hard to know because the subjunctive mood, because it's uncertain, we don't know if it's going to happen or not. So the tense is a little more difficult to determine with subjunctive. But that may tells us that there's some uncertainty here. His hope is that his faith may become effective. Okay. All right. How about is? What tense is that?
That is the present tense.
Yes. And it is actually active in the voice, even though it's a state of being. So it's technically not an action here, but it is describing the subject. So we would call it active voice in this case. And then what kind of mood is this? Is this indicative, imperative, subjunctive? What do you think?
That's the indicative.
Yes.
Yes, indicative.
All right, good. Making a statement. All right. Very good. We will take the pressure off you, brother. Thank you for doing that. Verse, we'll ask Brother Yancey to do verse 7.
Verse 7, have derived.
Yes.
And have been refreshed.
Okay.
Yeah, tense is present.
Okay, so let's see here. I have derived. Now we have a clue here. Did this happen in the present or in the past from the point of view of the speaker? I have derived. Notice the ending of the verb.
Yeah, it seems like past, but
yeah,
because
it's past.
Verb, yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's past tense and it's active.
Yep.
Indicative.
Yes. All right, good.
And the second one, I think the same, past.
Yeah, it's the same. Okay.
Yeah.
Have been refreshed. So it's already happened. The hearts of the saints, they're not being refreshed right now, but they have been refreshed. So past tense. Okay. All right, good. And now all we notice here is, by the way, the verses 4 to 6, all the verbs are present tense. All the verbs in the whole passage are active. And then there's one subjunctive. But all the rest are indicative. So there's no commands here. He's making statements here, isn't he? These verses are all just, he's making statements. They're all in the indicative. Again, except for may become, because that is subjunctive, because notice it's his prayer. He's not sure that it's going to happen. There is some uncertainty. So it's a prayer. He doesn't know what the answer to that prayer is going to be, but it's his desire that his faith become effective. So it's a subjunctive. All right, but all the
Pastor
rest of
Tim?
the verbs are indicative. Question?
I'm quite confused with have been refreshed. I was thinking if it's passive because the subject is hearts. The hearts have been refreshed.
Hearts of the saints have been refreshed. Okay, good question. The hearts of the saints have been refreshed. So yeah, you got a good point there. Have been refreshed. So it's something that's been done to them. All right. So yeah, I think you're right, Stephen. That's passive. Because the heart is not refreshing itself. We're doing the refreshing. It's been refreshed through you. So the agent is you. You refresh their hearts. So yeah. That is actually passive. All right, good catch. All right, good. Any other questions or comments? All right. Good. Very good. Okay. Well, we spent a lot of time on the verbs there, but and that to me, this is the most important textual observation is looking at the verbs. What are the verbs doing in the passage? Are they commands? Are they, statements, indicative or questions? Are they, what tense are they? And then also the mood, or sorry, the voice is important. The active or passive. And so then you can just notice and just make observations from each of those verbs and what they're doing in the text. Okay. And like I said here, Paul doesn't give any commands or questions or they're all present tense, except for verse 7. Those are past, but they're all indicative or there's one subjunctive case, as I mentioned before. And all of them are active except for the last one. Okay. All right. Good. Any questions, comments?
Pastor Tim,
Yes, sir.
um, this the verb have derived. This happened in the past and continues in the present. Am I correct, Pastor?
Well, the verb is past tense in English. Certainly, yeah, we could see just that joy and comfort probably, is still with Paul, but he's talking about, what it's something that from his perspective has happened in the past.
So has also in the past, and there is also a possibility, Pastor, that the have is had is used instead of have. Is it also past? Have, has, and
Oh,
had.
yeah. Yeah, he could have said, I
They're
had
all
derived.
past.
That would also be past. And that would be speaking, yeah, more of the idea of it all happened in the past. Whereas when he says, I have derived, that might have the idea of also past, but also still continuing effects. Now, in Greek, there's a tense called the perfect tense, which carries the idea of a past act with continuing results in the present. Now, I don't think in the Greek that here that tense was used. Let me look. No, it's an aorist tense verb, but sometimes you may have like a good example would be of that would be Ephesians 2. You know these verses. By grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourselves, is the gift of God. have been saved, actually in the Greek is in the perfect tense. So it's not just a past act, but the idea is a past act with continuing results in the present. And Paul here is emphasizing that the results in the present, that the grace wasn't just something in the past, but also has continuing effect now. So you could even translate this, you are saved through faith. All right, but English, it more has the idea of past tense in this case. So we'll use, by looking at, like there's tools like the Discover Bible, or if you look in the interlinear, it'll show you it's in the perfect tense, which tells us a little more about what this verb is doing here. It's not just an action that only took place in the past, but it is also has continuing results in the present. And that's what's being emphasized here in this example. All right. Okay, let's cover a little bit of the other things on our textual observations. A second very important example or observation is pronouns. Pronouns are extremely common in the scriptures, and they're very common in, normal conversation. And so in this, when we're doing textual observations, what we're looking for is the identify each pronoun and what it refers to, or technically called the antecedent. That is, remember, pronouns simply are specifying a noun. They are replacing a noun. All right. So we want to identify the pronoun and also what person it is. So for example, first person pronouns, I, we, us, my, our. Second person, you, your. Third person, he, she, they, them, her, his. Now, we're not going to get into a discussion of gender pronouns here, okay? Males are he, females are she, all right? But here in the States now, I think we have 30 pronouns that people want to be referred to themselves as. But we're not going to get into all of that. All right, we're just sticking with the biblical gender identities here. And there's only 3 pronouns, personal pronouns, first, second, and third person. Now, there are other kinds of pronouns, reflexive, relative, all those. And if you go to your syllabus, I think we have in the pronoun section, we have a whole discussion on that. You can go there and get more details. But for now, we just want to focus on the personal pronouns, which are all listed here. Okay. And again, we want to identify what those pronouns refer to. That's what's key. Okay, understanding what the pronoun is pointing to. Okay, so that said, let's just jump right into the example from Philemon. Chong, I'm going to ask you to do verse 4. Just identify the pronouns and then who they refer to, or what noun they refer to.
I.
Okay. Let's just start. Okay, so what I is what kind of pronoun? First, second, or third person?
First.
First person, singular, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then who does it refer to?
Refer to himself.
Yeah, to the author, right? In this case, Paul. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Any other pronouns in? So we have another I. So same.
The same.
Any other pronouns here?
You.
You. All right. What is that? What kind of pronoun? First, second, or third person?
Second person.
Sorry?
Second
person. And is it singular or plural?
Singular.
Okay, who's he writing to? Yeah, Philemon, right? So it's
Philemon.
likely then singular in this case. Now, here's where English is a problem. English, you cannot tell if it's singular or plural. You actually have to go to the Greek text for that one. But because we know he's speaking to Philemon, the earlier verses, he addresses to Philemon, so we know it's probably singular here. Who does it refer to? I just said that. Who refers to?
Refers to Philemon.
Philemon. Okay, good. All right, why don't you do verse 5 as well?
Should I continue?
Sorry.
I will continue this one until
Verse 5.
5.
Yeah, can you do verse 5?
Okay. There's an I also.
Yep.
Prepare first person preparing to Paul also.
Yep. Same as verse 4.
Yeah. And your
Yes.
second person referring to Philemon.
Yep. Refers to Philemon again. Exactly. And then actually we have you as well here, don't we?
You, yeah.
Yeah, so it's also you and your.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Very good. All right. Let me have Jed. Jed, you want to take on verse 6?
Okay. I,
Okay.
first person singular, referring to Paul.
Yep.
Then your, second person singular, and referring to Philemon.
Okay.
Then us,
Yes.
it is third person plural.
Okay, us.
Meaning including Paul and Philemon.
That's right. So
And
it's
there is
first person, and it's plural in this case, right? Because it's more than one
plural.
person. And yeah, it refers to
Including Paul and Philemon and the rest of church in.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Why don't you go ahead and do verse 7?
I.
Yep. So we got the same there. I.
Then your.
Yep. Same. Philemon, right? Second person.
And there's my.
Yes. My, which would be the same as I, right? First person singular.
First one.
Yeah.
Yes. And you.
Yep. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward in this text. All right. Good. I think that's all the pronouns. All right, so that's what you're going to do. And again, all this is doing, again, this may seem, picky and detailed and, too much English. But again, we're looking at the diamond and we're rotating it. And now we're looking at the pronouns because you want to make sure in this case, in Philemon, what's important and significant, what we want to ask ourselves is, those, especially the pronouns you, is he referring to just Philemon or more than Philemon? And what's interesting is if you actually look at the Greek text and identifies them as singular or plural, and if we look at Philemon, what's interesting is if we get to there's an important feature here to notice. Notice Paul's the author, Paul and Timothy, to Philemon. our beloved brother. So he's the primary, but notice he adds to Iphia, Archippus, and to the church in your house. So the letter is primarily given to Philemon. However, he does mention other people in the letter. And as you go through the letter, what you will find is, and again, you can go to an interlinear to see this, but what you'll find is that there are, in verse 3, when he says grace to you, the you there is plural. Sorry. He's speaking to everybody there, but then the you becomes singular in verse 4 and 5, and all the way through, I plead with you for my child Onesimus, who was formerly useless to you. All of these are singular until we get to, I think it's verse 22. Verse 21, let me look. Yeah, singular. And then verse 22. Singular. Let me see. Yeah, then when we get to verse 22, I think it's through your prayers. So this your here is plural. All right, and this is plural. So he switches in verse 22 to speaking to the church. Verses 4 to 21, he's speaking to Philemon. But when he gets to 22, I hope through your prayers, your plural, I will be graciously given to you, plural. And then at the end, verse 25, the Lord be with your spirit, plural. So in this letter, we see just by the pronouns being not just singular, but at the beginning and end, they are plural, indicating that Paul is speaking to the whole church in those parts. But in the body of the letter, from verse 4 to 21, he's speaking just to Philemon. All right, so this is important, and it's helpful to understand the letter by just looking at that small detail in the pronouns. Okay, so keep that in mind. Again, this may seem detailed and overly picky and excessive, but it's intentional because we want to pay attention to what is going on and the pronouns and what do they refer to. Okay, so keep that in mind. Comments or questions? All right, so verbs and pronouns,
None
I think.
so far.
Okay, thank you. Verbs and pronouns are important details to look at when you're doing the observations. Now, we're not going to have time to go into all the details now. We only have a few minutes left. But the other things to look for, you're going to look at conjunctions. All right, you want to notice, is it coordinating or subordinating? Remember coordinating, and you'll have already thought about this when you do your diagram, but we want to come back to it and notice that. Is it coordinating, meaning does it connect to phrases, words, or clauses that are grammatically equal? Or is it subordinating? Is it connecting a dependent clause to another word in the sentence? So you're going to want to pay attention to that and identify that. All right, so in Philemon, we have, I thank my God when, that is subordinating. Remembering your prayers because, subordinating, I hear of your love, and that one is coordinating. The faith that you have toward all the saints and coordinating. So it's connecting the faith you have towards the Lord Jesus and the saints. It's connecting those. And then, and I pray, it's coordinating, that the sharing of your faith may become effective for the full knowledge of every good thing that is in us, for the sake of Christ, for subordinating, I have derived much joy, and coordinating, so connecting joy and comfort from your love, my brother, because subordinating, the hearts of the saints have been refreshed through you. Okay? All right, so you'll go through and look for the conjunctions, and then you'll look for repetitions of words. Now, we've already done that before when you made observations, but here you're just going to focus on your text and look for any words that are repeated here. And again, also synonyms. So it doesn't have to be the exact same word. So for example, right, we have joy, comfort, refreshed. Those are all similar ideas, though they're different words. So, and then contrasts. So look for things being contrasted. I don't think there's anything in the text here that's, I don't think there are any contrasts here. Normally the words like but. So for example, in Philemon, one example of contrast would be, I think verse 11, who was formerly useless to you, but now is useful both to you and me. So there's a contrast. All right. The next thing to look for is lists. Okay. Which again, we don't, let me see. Do we have a list here in verses 4 to 7? I don't think we do. But if you look at verse 1 and 2, there's a list, right? A list of the recipients. Philemon, Apphia, Archippus, the church, right? So that would be a list. All right. And then you want to look for, following that, comparisons, things being compared. Then look for lists. I already mentioned that. Purpose result statements. So for example, I thank my God is a statement, and then notice because I hear of your love. So that's a result. I thank because I hear of your love. All right. I have derived much joy because the hearts of the saints have been refreshed. So that's again a result. I've derived much joy. Why? Because the hearts of the saints have been refreshed. So you're just looking through the passage for purpose and result statements. Then are there any conditional clauses? There's none in this passage here, but you look for the words if and then. So, so for your assignment, let me just pull that up, and then we'll need to be done here. Where is it? Assignment 1.16. Okay. Okay. Here's the assignment you'll see when you pull it up. Okay. Okay, instructions. In this assignment, right, you'll complete step 5. Again, notice for both of your assigned passages. Okay, so do this all together, both your assigned passages, and then these are what you're going to look for. Now, we focused attention on verbs and pronouns, and I did that on purpose because those are the most important in my view. But then these are the other things you're going to look for, okay? And what I did was just gave you an example from Philemon. Those four verses we were looking at, I gave you an example. All right, it's passive for each of them. So you look through the example here for you. Then what I offered you is space for you to do this for your assigned passages. So I gave you the example from Philemon 4 to 7, And then you'll just do that for your assigned verses from Colossians. Okay? So look for verbs in both assigned passages together, pronouns, conjunctions, etc. Okay? For all of these. All right? Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But like I said, this assignment might feel a little bit tedious or a little bit detail-oriented to you. But again, it's forcing us to look at the passage from, another vantage point, another point of view. And, I think through that, we'll find observations or insights from the text, all right? And even if it's just one thing, if you do this assignment, it's like, but one insight, it comes to you. I think it's worth it. All right. So that's textual observations. We do that after we do the block diagram, because we're already, once you've done the block diagram, you'll be pretty familiar with the text already. So this step shouldn't take you that long by this point, because you've already gone through the passage. You've even looked at the grammar of the passage doing the block diagram. All right. And then once you finish this step, you can go, oh, okay, English grammar, I don't have to think about again, because you move towards word study, which is what we're going to cover together next week. All right. Lord willing, we'll look at word studies and review that as well, and consider that assignment. Okay. Any questions or comment statements? Cries of despair?
How many tissue rolls would they wasted in the process?
Okay, you can put the tissue away though now. We're next week you won't need the tissue as much.
Oh, that's a relief then.
Yeah.
Pastor Tim, one more thing.
Yes.
What about modal verbs like should? Will we include them?
Yeah. So that'll go with the verb. He should eat his dinner. Do you mean, so would you include that when you put the verb down, or what's your question?
Yeah, my question is, so should you. So
yes. That would be a verb. I exercise every week. So should you. The idea is, so should you exercise, right? So the should incorporates the verbal, the previous verb.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor Tim.
All right, good. Other questions? And as I said at the beginning, most of you guys are doing really well, staying on your assignments. Please encourage your brothers to keep at it, and don't be discouraged. There's still plenty of time. At this point, what is it? February, so March, April, May. So there's still 3 months. And if you're doing, just try to get a couple assignments done a week, and you'll still be able to finish even if you're way behind. Most everybody's done the reading, which is great. It's the written assignments that have presented more of a challenge to folks, but just set time aside each week. Be consistent. If you block out a few hours each week, then you'll be able to finish. I think, get it done. All right, but just let me know if you're having trouble or anything I can do to help. Okay.
Okay, Pastor Tim.
All right.
Pastor Tim,
Yes, sir.
after our assignment have been graded by you and then with the comments of it, can we resubmit it
Yeah.
to you?
Yep. And I'll even, if you make changes and edits, I'll even increase your grade too if you do that. There's a couple of you have already done that, some assignments. You redid them, and or I'll even mention to you if there's something you left out or didn't do well on, I'll encourage you to redo the assignment, and I'll increase your grade. But you're always welcome to make changes or edits or update your assignments if you want.
So I thought, Pastor Tim, it will be the final. So just the final grade will be, it depends, it will change it, right?
Yeah, normally, you know, and most of the time, right, you turn in an assignment and the grade is you get what you get. But, you know, I like, you know, I want to give you credit if you make effort and go back and work on things. Now, if I've already given you the answers, that's one thing. But if I tell you, know, if you left out a section or didn't complete some part of it, I'll often say, hey, redo the assignment, you know, finish this section, then I'll adjust your grade. So
it
I'll
will
give
also
you,
based on what you have given, what you're messaging to us, right?
yeah,
So if there's one thing that you want to say that we do this, so we will just do what it says, right?
yeah,
Okay. If
yeah,
not, it's just okay to leave it as at ease, Pastor
yeah,
Tim.
yeah. You can leave it as is. You don't have to redo it. But if I suggest that to you, then you know you should.
Okay. That's all for me, Pastor Tim. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thanks. Thank you for the question. All right, guys. Well, I'll let you go. I know it's lunchtime. Unless there's any last questions.
And so far from me, Pastor Tim. Thank you.
Okay.
None so far.
All right. Well, thank you for making the time today, guys. Appreciate that. Hopefully, going over this might refresh a few things for you. I hope it's helpful. You always have the syllabus you can go back to. It's got more details. I don't cover everything again from there, but I just try to highlight a few things I think are important. And then you can always, you know, rewatch the video as well from that. Okay. All right. Well, let me pray for you guys. Sorry,
Thank you,
question,
Pastor.
comment? Oh, okay. Hey, let me close our time in prayer, and then I'll let you go. Or actually, let me ask. Let's see, Brother Resty, maybe you. Would you mind closing us in prayer?